Hello and welcome to VLOG2. Over the next 10 minutes I intend to demonstrate practices for both speed and agility, highlighting how skills and capacities relate to each. I'll then illustrate a range of appropriate derivative exercises being employed to supplement performance or help resolve identified issues. To add context to what is being discussed, both the speed and agility examples are directly linked to sport-related practice, and to add a further layer of comparison, the relative competency of the sport-related practice is low for me within the sport of bobsleigh and specifically sprinting, and high for Dave within badminton. Bobsleigh and sprinting. In order to examine the skills and capacities within a speed drill, I will be using myself as a case study contextualised within the sport of bobsleigh. Performance in this sport is largely influenced by the speed at which you can accelerate the sled during the start, before relying on the skill of the pilot to navigate the most effective route down the rest of the track. The speed of the start contributes hugely to the overall time. In order for an athlete to maximise their performance, they need a balanced combination of strength and speed to achieve maximum possible power, the ability to exert maximum force as quickly as possible against the sled. For this reason, athletes entering the sport of bobsleigh typically have a background in either strength sports or track sprinting, and probably more often the latter. In my case, however, I have a training history of strength sport and lack the technical skills and capacities required for high performance sprinting. For this reason, it is far more beneficial for me to focus on improving sprint performance in order to maximise the cost-benefit ratio of training. This involves improving the technical skill of sprinting as well as various forms of capacity building, such as developing my rate of force production, plyometrics, cadence development, and requisite mobility and stability training. The primary speed drill being examined is track sprinting over 60 metres. My level of relative competency for sprinting is low, and therefore there are extensive improvements needed both in terms of skills and capacities. Focusing firstly on skills, there are errors in technique, which I will now illustrate. Firstly, I'm failing to achieve a straight line between the heel and the shoulder, mostly due to a degree of flexion at the hip and knee. This is largely a skill-related technical error, but also restricted somewhat by tight hip flexors, which is a capacity issue, and one I'll illustrate in more detail shortly. You can also see a rotation of the shoulders, which is allowing energy to be lost, which should otherwise be directed into the track. There also needs to be more dorsiflexion of the foot and an increase to the stride length. There is also quite a weak plantar flexion strike of the foot into the ground and minimal drag through. This next image demonstrates rising out of the drive phase too early, and again not generating that straight line of force through the shoulder into the heel during this phase. My head is also excessively dropped compared to the line of the torso, which creates the illusion of continuing to be in the drive phase, when in fact the rest of the body has largely risen out of it. The forward knee needs to be higher, which will help increase the stride length and generate a more forceful foot strike into the floor. Looking rear on, the hips need to be higher at the start, which will allow greater force production as the hips forcefully extend and begin to propel the body forwards. And the first clearance stride is too short. This can be improved by raising the hips before the start, driving off the front foot and pulling the knee through further more aggressively. This will also be assisted with improving hip flexor mobility. There is torso lean from side to side once out of the drive phase. This lack of stability and tension is losing energy which should be directed into the track, particularly energy contributed through the arm drive. Once into full upright running, the lead knee is too low and the hips aren't coming through. At this stage, this is most likely a cause of limited hip flexor range of motion. Ideally, the lead knee should reach 90 degrees. This is a capacity issue and prevents a more upright posture, subsequently a high leading knee, strong striking position to the ground and overall stride length. What can be seen throughout in terms of capacities is a lack of rate of force production. The general cadence of the legs is too slow, lack of hip flexor mobility and loss of appropriate tension in the core. Before cantering through some of the strategies being employed to help improve skills and capacities, I'd just like to highlight the extent of the problem with the hip flexors for these two images. This is a significant issue that has developed over a long period and may now also take a significant period to undo. A range of derivative exercises and drills is now being utilised to rectify or develop identified issues. These include high knee skips with pronounced plantar flexion strike and drag through the ball of the foot. The tight hip flexors can also be clearly seen in this drill with an inability to fully extend with the rear leg. Butt kicks to help improve foot cadence. Of note, the heel rises directly beneath the torso rather than to the rear. This more closely resembles the movement pattern required during sprinting. High knees against the bar for cadence and trying to replicate the straight line body position during the drive phase. A variety of plyometric drills to help increase the rate of force production and speed strength. And sprinting with an empty prowler while trying to generate the correct body position for the drive phase. The prowler is also particularly useful for bobsleigh training due to its close dynamic correspondence with pushing a sled. In summary, my track 60 metre speed drill is lacking in terms of both skill and capacity and demonstrates a relatively low level of technical competence. Fortunately, absolute strength and body mass allows me a relatively better performance in bobsleigh than track sprinting. However, in terms of cost-benefit training, sprinting, the skills involved in its technical application and its requisite capacities is where my optimal training focus currently lies. Skills and capacities within agility practice in badminton. A basic agility drill, which can be referred to as react and returns, R&Rs, is being demonstrated in this first series of clips. Its primary purpose is to develop or maintain the following things: reaction to the visual cue of the shuttle, body position prior to the movement, movement across the court to reach and return the shuttle, and movement back to the start or ready position. Dave is a relatively good badminton player who is currently training for the Inter-Service Championships. Therefore, as one would expect, his level of skill and capacity to perform this drill is relatively high, but there is room for improvement in regards to both. Due to his high level of competence, basics such as holding the racket and hitting the shuttle are far less of a priority for Dave's training. Where he can maximise the cost-benefit ratio of his training is in his quick and effective movement across the court, developing his body position such that he's well placed to react with a subsequent shot, and developing the capacity to maintain his speed and intensity across the duration of a game and multiple games in a tournament setting. Generally speaking, he already possesses the requisite capacity to perform the repertoire of basic skills he might need to employ, but he can develop their effectiveness further by increasing the skill with which he performs them and their capacity to perform them with greater speed and intensity, and develop the endurance to maintain that intensity. Dave's body positioning is generally very good. His wide stance provides stability, balance, a lower centre of gravity. The foot positioning also allows Dave to instantly press off with either foot and generate sideways directional movement. His left arm is typically extended to provide a counterbalance to the striking with his right arm, and he is predominantly on the balls of his feet, maintaining tension in his lower limbs so that he's able to quickly contract or release tension depending on which direction he needs to move. He'll lunge to the right with his right leg and vice versa with the left, allowing for quicker movements around the court and back to the ready position, and eliminating the need for additional trunk rotation. The right leg will only come across in a lunge to the left for the most demanding shots where he needs to reach with his striking right arm. His head and gaze remain stable for clear and early identification of the shuttle's vector. Dave's striking of the shuttle is generally good. Although he misses a small number of shuttles during this practice, this is symptomatic of the deliverer attempting to make the practice difficult enough to stretch Dave's skills and capacities towards their limits. In the next series of clips, we will look at some of the derivative exercises aimed at increasing both his skills and capacities, the first of which is the shuttle relay. Here Dave is required to move the shuttle from one side of the court to the other. You will notice that Dave leads with the left leg if he is lunging to the left and vice versa with the right, albeit for the occasional mistake. This is a skill error, but one which this practice will help to prevent. He returns to the ready position in the centre of the court between each transition, adopting the wide stance before initiating the next movement. When reaching for the shuttle on the floor, it replicates the lowest likely position Dave will need to adopt to strike the shuttle. This drill is primarily focused on capacity, with a secondary skill element. In terms of capacity, at Dave's high level of competence, he's maintaining the mobility required for the demanding shots, rather than developing it. He is, however, developing the velocity with which he moves, and the endurance to maintain greater speed for longer durations. In the next couple of clips, Dave is working on derivative drills that focus on capacity over skill to an even greater degree. This is important for Dave, as he is unlikely to improve his skill significantly further in the near term. On the other hand, he now needs to be suitably conditioned for inter-services competition. In this first clip, Dave is working on his lunge endurance. Primarily capacity building, this drill focuses more on the upper portion of Dave's legs, particularly his quadriceps, glutes and adductors. The next drill is called fast feet and is primarily capacity building in the lower portion of Dave's legs, particularly developing endurance in the gastrocnemius. You'll notice in both these clips, Dave always returns to the ready position between each movement, reinforcing the skill of adopting the correct body position while increasing the capacity to move between positions. This final clip demonstrates another drill which this time prioritises skill over capacity. Dave is reacting to the shuttle and quickly manoeuvring himself in the racket. This is a finer skill compared to the gross movements and endurance practiced elsewhere, but is another key facet in improving the performance of the R&R agility drill and badminton overall. In summary, the R&R agility drill is part of a much wider approach to improving Dave's badminton performance. He is currently working on skills and capacities in equal measure, however it's now predominantly the skills of reacting to his opponent and reading the game to his advantage. It's less so about the skills of competently striking the shuttle or adopting the correct body positions. Likewise, in terms of capacities, Dave is working on the capacity to adopt different body positions quicker, move around the court faster, and have the endurance to maintain a high degree of intensity for longer. He's able to focus less so on the capacity to be able to perform the basic movements. In overall summary, hopefully I have demonstrated the application of speed and agility drills, both within the context of sport-specific examples and how mine and Dave's performance of these drills relates to skills and capacities. I concluded each with a flavour of additional drills and appropriate interventions to help rectify identified issues and develop performance. Thanks for watching.